Have you ever felt like your life was slowly falling apart before your very eyes? I have. When I discovered the dark truth behind the woman who once promised me love, trust, and loyalty, I knew everything would come to an end tonight. The enchanting streets of Paris and the restaurants adorned with lights were nothing but a mask hiding a great betrayal. But the real question is, did I ever truly know Sophie? Or had I been chasing an illusion all these years? Before diving into my story, if you don't want your life to be turned upside down like mine, subscribe to my channel to learn real lessons from the real stories we share every day, just like mine. Also, share your thoughts about the shocking truths I've experienced in the comments, and please show your support by liking my video. Now that you've subscribed, let's dive into my story. I never noticed the moment when everything would come crashing down. Betrayal sometimes arrives silently. It looks you in the eyes, but you turn away because you refuse to see. But I, Alexandre Duval, could no longer keep my eyes closed. Now I remember that night when everything collapsed on us. My life, once a romantic fairy tale under the lights of Paris, had turned into a nightmare of Sophie's betrayal, and I couldn't see how close that betrayal was. I remember the day I first met Sophie. We were at that cafe by the Seine, sipping coffee, lost in a deep conversation about the history of architecture. In those moments, Sophie entered my life with her warm smile. When I married her, I thought I was the luckiest man in Paris, elegant, intelligent, and as beautiful as the rhythm of Paris itself. Our life seemed perfect, and everyone envied us. But people only believe what they see on the surface. No one knows what lies beneath. I had sensed that Sophie had changed. The passion between us had slowly turned into routine. As my career grew, designing some of the biggest projects in Paris, I didn't realize her loneliness. I was too focused on my own successes, meetings every morning, plans every evening, yet Sophie was seeking attention elsewhere. That elsewhere was with a man named Lucas Bond. While I was immersed in my work, Sophie found him. Lucas. The moment I heard his name, I can't describe the rage I felt. One of those popular, handsome types in the business world who easily draws people in. It didn't take me long to understand how far their lies had gone. At first, I heard about their innocent flirtations. I even thought it might be just a business partnership. But what do you do when they cross the line? You feel it. But when there's no concrete evidence, how can you hold on to your suspicions? Lately, Sophie had been unusually quiet at home. She was constantly hiding her phone, and our conversations had become short and superficial. Something was definitely wrong. It was impossible to deny. But even then, I didn't want to see it, because once you realize it, there's no going back. That evening, when I found out about the restaurant Sophie had gone to, it didn't take me long to write the message on my phone. Enjoy the wine, Sophie. I hope it's sweeter than the taste of betrayal. When I hit send, there was an emptiness inside me. Time seemed to stop. I was ready to face the truth, but at the same time, I wasn't. I knew I would be broken. Yet somehow I still wanted Sophie to explain herself. Maybe I was still willing to hear another lie from her, just to prolong the pain. I could imagine Sophie's expression, how she panicked when she received that message, her hands trembling. That moment was a turning point for me. The mask had fallen, and everything was about to come to light. And in that instant, I decided to end Sophie's game of deception. My second message followed. You've always said you loved French cuisine. Let's see if you'll still enjoy it while your life falls apart. I felt ruthless, but at the same time a deep sense of justice had overtaken me. Sophie needed to understand what she had done to me. Love, loyalty, everything had shattered. Could Sophie even foresee, under the romantic lights of Paris, how her life was about to crumble? I could predict how she felt, sitting at that restaurant with him. While Lucas touched her, Sophie's mind was on me. She could no longer lie to me, no longer hide. The reality she would have to face was bitter, and I was at the very center of that reality. I typed my final message. When you return home, I'll be gone. Just like your life, nothing will remain. Imagining Sophie's reaction wasn't difficult. She had realized how fragile the perfect life she had built really was. Now she was facing the truth. Everything was over. Her marriage to me, our once happy life, it had all been an illusion. Sophie had lost me. As I recall those moments, the pain gives way to a strange sense of relief. A man's pride and identity are deeply shaken when he is betrayed. But that night, I realized that what I had lost reminded me of who I truly was. Sophie had seemed like the woman of my life, but she was just a mask. True love is nurtured by trust, not by betrayal. I'm not sure how long it took me to overcome the initial shock, but time had almost stopped. When someone you love betrays you, you feel deceived and worthless. The person who had been by your side for years, the one you thought gave you security, suddenly takes everything away. And this loss is not just physical, it's also a spiritual collapse. Everything in your life is questioned. I had full trust in Sophie. She appeared to be the perfect wife, a wonderful partner, but betrayal revealed the darkness behind this facade. When the weight of betrayal became unbearable, I found myself by the banks of the Seine. The lights of Paris reflecting on the river were like a stage showcasing the collapse of my life. Perhaps my biggest mistake was thinking that Sophie would never leave me, that she would remain loyal. But betrayal's stealthy approach shattered the trust that had been my greatest weakness. I couldn't see how our relationship had slowly decayed over the years. I had been focused on my career, believing that my successes would keep us together. But in fact, I had deepened the distance between us with each passing day. Now, looking back, all the signs had been there, but I didn't want to see them. That night, as the cold wind of Paris hit my face, I quickened my pace as I walked through the glittering streets of the city. I was actually going nowhere. On one hand, I was trying to feel strong, but on the other, the pain inside me was almost suffocating. I was trapped between these two emotions. My mind was like a battlefield. Sophie's face, Lucas's smile, our past, our memories, everything was pouring down on me like a storm of weapons. The anger I felt towards Sophie was greater than I had imagined. When I learned of her betrayal, the pain had created a void within me, but that void had slowly filled with rage. How could she be so selfish? How could she so easily destroy the life we had built together over the years? How could she ignore our shared future while pursuing her own desires? I couldn't shake the memory of the day I first met Sophie. When I think back to that day, everything seemed so pure and real. The excitement I felt when I first looked into her eyes, the happiness I experienced when I married her. Was it all a lie, or had it simply decayed over time? These were the questions that kept me up at night. When does one stop trusting someone they love? When had I stopped believing in Sophie, or had she long stopped believing in me? Time seemed to stand still. When one carries the weight of the past, they also try to shape their future, and I was no different. I couldn't remain stuck in Sophie's betrayal. I refused to drown in this pain for the rest of my life. Yes, Sophie had once been the center of my world, but not anymore. Now it was time for me to rebuild my life. In the cold night of Paris, one thought emerged clearly in my mind. I can live without Sophie. In fact, I would be much stronger without her. This betrayal may have torn me apart, but it would also reshape me. In moments of pain, one discovers their true identity, and through this pain, I would rediscover myself. I stood up and slowly began walking along the riverbank. My steps were now more determined. Yes, I would never forget Sophie's betrayal, but I wouldn't let it control the rest of my life. With each step, I left the past further behind. No matter how difficult, there was a new path ahead of me. This path belonged only to me, and I would rely on no one but myself on this journey. Losing Sophie would not be my downfall. She was now just a memory, a lesson, a warning. I would rebuild my future with my own hands, and one day, I knew Sophie would be crushed under the weight of her regret. But by then, I would have long freed myself from the shadows of the past. The lights of Paris would shine again, but this time I would walk under them, not alone, but as a stronger person. Meanwhile, Sophie would be condemned to disappear into her own darkness.